Diving into NFL Week 11. Eric is here with us to get through our game by game previews and a couple key notes as we dive into Week 11. We're recording this on Wednesday night, so we'll be able to talk about the Thursday game. Remember, we have a Twitter space Thursday, 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, just about 10 minutes or so to preview the Thursday game and give out a couple plays there. If the playoffs started today, Eric, the entire AFC East would be in the playoffs. All four of them. And the NFC East would have three of the four teams. Only the Commanders would be out. They're only a half game out, and they're 5-5. They're 500. So,
which is absolutely crazy. I dove in. I found some juicy futures I like for the people. I think some juicy prices out there, and I didn't think I was going to like that much. It's always kind of weird, like weeks like this. I'm always like, you know what? You really don't see anything you like. I mean, I have a ton of bets already locked in for this weekend. I absolutely love this slate of games.
Well, let's start with the Thursday night game. We've got Titans. We've got Packers. We're looking at the lines with Betfred Sports. Check out Betfred Sportsbook anywhere that you can play. Titans, Packers. Packers are a 3-point favorite here. Titans, a 3-point underdog on the road. Over-under in this scheme is 41. So you have the Titans coming in off of another victory, just kind of quietly under the radar, picking up another workman-like win. You have the Packers who kind of lucked into a victory last time out. It was the spot of all spots for Green Bay. It was like they were the most undervalued they've ever been in that particular spot. And Green Bay was down 14 in the fourth quarter. It was a big day for rookie wide receiver Watson, who had 4 catches, 107 yards, 3 touchdowns. As a team, they ran for 207 yards and a touchdown. Jones has his 4th 100 rushing yard game of the season. He had 4 10-plus yard runs and almost 6 yards per rush, 4 first downs. He scored a touchdown on 21 carries. See, Eric, when we talked about Green Bay early in the year, in like our preseason preview, I thought they were going to look way different this year. And I think we both sort of did. I didn't think they would be a fantastic team, but it felt like a team that would lean on their run and the defense. And they've been really stubborn a lot of this year in trying to put like a square peg into a round hole. The best coaches are the coaches that coach up the personnel they have, not coaches who try to do things and make players into players they're not. They didn't have good wide receivers early in the year. They didn't have chemistry. And instead of leaning on the run, they tried to force things. And maybe at this point of the year now, you have a rookie like Watson who's figuring things out. And how much easier was this game for Watson and for Rodgers because they leaned on the run? They ran the ball the first 7 times to start the game. They ran the ball 13 of their first 16 plays. Coming into this week, when they had passed more than they had run, so just a 50% split. Green Bay was 1-5 in games when they passed for more than 50% of their plays. It's pretty simple with them. They're not going to win every game when it's like that, but for this team, they have to be built on the run.
Yeah, they need to run the ball. It's kind of like they figured out they had this dynamic running back in Aaron Jones. But, I know I've been saying it for years, last couple of years. This kid should be getting the ball a lot more than he is.
Yep.
Maybe they'll start to lean on him more and more and more. It's kind of like they're just found out they had him. I really think the offense should be running and funneling through him. Watkins did make some plays. Lazard made a big catch. Defense, played better, but I still think it's lacking a little bit. You have the Tennessee Titans coming in there. And we all know what the Titans are going to do. They're just going to turn around, hand the ball off to Derrick Henry. And you're going up against a team which is 30th DVOA against the run, giving up on average 123.4 yards rushing per game. The Packers are coming off an emotional overtime victory.
That felt like it saved their season too, right? It did.
Over their coach. And I'm getting the Titans team +3. And it's my boy Vrabel, 64%.
This is the spot for him.
58% against the spread as a road dog. This is just what he does. He covers when he's a dog. And what the Titans are going to look to do, run the ball. I know they have 4 starters ruled out, but you still have Derrick Henry back there. And it's not like the Packers defense has been lights out. Plus Jenkins and the left tackle, David Bakhtiari, they didn't practice today. So
and Bakhtiari, here's the thing. He's fantastic, but I think right now, the last couple years, and I don't like doing this because I hate it when people do this with like Anthony Davis for the Lakers, right? I think the injuries have started getting in his head. Because for him, he's out there some games, he starts some games, then he comes out for a couple series, he goes back in. You're dealing with those injuries. You're a big dude. When he's on the field and he's playing at a top level, dude, he's one of the absolute best in the league. But it's been hard to trust him for the last couple years for them.
Yeah, absolutely hard. And their offensive line hasn't been producing. Defense hasn't been what it's been. And I'll say it right now. Vrabel is the new Belichick. I mean, he is basically Belichick.
Oh, he is. You're right. You're right.
With what he's
like last week, they're missing key players on defense. They somehow have 6 sacks and 18 quarterback hits of Wilson. 9 penalties in a game for 60 yards. How do they win that game? They had 6 straight punts to start the game. How do they win that game? And what's crazy is they were down. That's the template for how you want to beat them. They were down in that game early. And they had to come all the way back. It was about Westbrook Akine. He had 5 catches for 119 yards. It was the first time a Titan wide receiver this year had 100 yards. 64 of them came on a flea flicker, kind of fluky. But you know what? They do this every week, and they continue to overachieve. And it's not like the numbers reflect it all that much. Like, they're not favored in this game on the road here or anything. They're a 3-point dog on the road. The number still wants you to lean Tennessee here. I mean,
I just think the Packers are overvalued just because that was the prime time.
Completely agree.
4:30 game. Everyone's like, "Oh, the Packers are back. Packers are going to make the playoffs." I just want to tell everyone to kind of, calm down, pump the brakes,
relax. That was so much more about Dallas than that was. And when we get into Dallas in a little bit, we can talk about what the Cowboys did to kind of spit that game out. And that was more what it was. The Cowboys spit that game out. Even in overtime, Dallas had the ball in field goal range, chose to go for it on 4th down instead of kicking a field goal that could have ended up winning the game for them. And then because they missed the field goal, all of a sudden Green Bay is in great field position. They don't have to do much in order to put themselves right in range to kick a field goal. So I did not take much out of that from Green Bay. And some teams, Dallas isn't very good against the run. So if Green Bay was going to stay disciplined and just run, they would have an advantage there. That's exactly what they did. They forced Dallas to make a few mistakes. Dallas was up by 14 and then made mistakes. I got to find that stat, the Cowboys stat, but I'm with you here. This feels like it's going to be one of our first 5 plays already. You like this one. I mean, they're 29-13 in the regular season since the beginning of 2020. The Titans, 29-13. They've won 3 of their last 4 games. They haven't scored over 19 points in any of them. They've won 3 of the last 4. And like I said, they came from behind. They averaged 7.5 yards per play in the final 2 quarters, and they couldn't even run the ball. Denver completely shut down Henry last week. He only had 53 yards. I mean, if you told me they had 14 total first downs in the game, they had 6 straight punts to start, they had 9 penalties for 60 yards, and Derrick Henry was held to 2.8 yards per carry on 19 carries, you're telling me there's no way they win that game. It's coaching. Again, it's all coaching.
Vrabel is at a whole different level, and you look at the level of talent. He has one exceptional defensive player in Jeffrey Simmons and one exceptional offensive player in Derrick Henry. And that's all he's bringing to the table. And he's winning games, and they're consistently in the playoffs, and they're consistently one of the top seeds.
It's unbelievable. Great job. Dallas was 180-0 in the regular season when entering the 4th quarter with a 14-point lead. They had 195-0, including the playoffs. And they threw 2 interceptions. Both of them were poor execution in the routes. That's what gave Green Bay the chance to bounce back into this one. Eric and I are on the Titans here, plus the 3. Let's go to Panthers-Ravens. You've got the Ravens coming in off a bye. They are a 13-point favorite. Your boy Baker He's going to be getting the start for Carolina. He knows the Ravens. He's played against them a few times. Over under in this game, 42. So you have the Ravens coming off a bye, and you had been pointing out how their defense now looks a little bit more complete over the last 3 games. They've allowed opponents have only converted 4 of 11 red zone trips into touchdowns over the last 3 games. Their red zone defense has been fantastic. They've recorded 19 sacks in their last 5 games. They only had 8 in their first 4. Much improved defense. The only thing that's been kind of weird with them this year, they haven't been good at home. I think they're 0-4-1 ATS at home. The Panthers won the game. They only threw for 16 times for 108 total yards. It's really tough to be confident in these wide receivers moving forward. Marshall, we like. He hit his over, right?
That was in the hurricane too. So I mean,
yeah.
like we got
so that's a good point. That's a good point. And it's been hard for them because they've been bouncing back and forth with the quarterbacks a lot. It's been hard to get sort of a rhythm, I think, for either one of them. But yeah, maybe they can get a little more flow because when we saw Baker come in at the end of the game a couple weeks ago, he looked better. They controlled the time of possession. They had over 34 minutes time of possession to just 26 for Atlanta. And Foreman ran really well, 130 yards on 31 carries, picked up 7 first downs, 5 missed tackles, 4 explosive runs. I don't really have a strong opinion in this game one way or the other. Carolina, Baltimore.
You know, I'm just looking at it. Lamar is actually 5-2 ATS as a double-digit dog. You know, Mayfield, you know, he's 3-5, which is 38%, small sample size, covering against the Ravens. 44.8% as a road dog. You know, everything I do as a gambler tells me to take this double digits.
Me too.
But I'm just gonna be honest, like I just don't trust Baker Mayfield with anything.
I know that's so funny. It's to me, it's got like Baker May, because that's what's funny is that I love you. Your stubbornness in some points, because if we're having a conversation, there's no way we could actually say that Baker has been worse than PJ looked at the worst of some of his this year. Like Baker overall is a better quarterback. I know what you're saying that you don't like him, but I agree with you. It's more of like the combination of what I've seen with Baker when he's been playing with these guys. And I don't know if it's the flow or him like not loving the situation he was in. I think the difference for a guy like PJ is like, for PJ, anywhere you go from him, he's going to give you his best. There's just only so much you can get from PJ. Like he has a ceiling. Like he can only do so much for you.
I felt what PJ has, which what Baker doesn't, is he's more of a factor in the running game.
A little more mobile.
And I felt he had somewhat of a connection with Terrence Marshall. I feel Baker has no connection with anyone in the wide receiver room.
And that is fair. I do think that Marshall was someone who started to definitely pop up a lot more once we had PJ getting the snaps. And this is actually pretty crucial, I think, for Baker the next couple of weeks to just look okay. He doesn't have to go out there and win games, but he just has to prove that he can be a quarterback for somebody else. Not even like a franchise guy, but just show, hey, if somebody needs a quarterback, I'm okay. If he doesn't play well these next few weeks, it's not going to matter. You know, it's not going to matter the situations for him the last 2 times if people say he was hurt and it was a bad situation. This is huge for him just to play well. I don't confidently want to back either side in here. This number is too big, like you were saying. And the Panthers got a couple extra days, but I need to see a little bit more before I would dive in on this game.
And I mean, the Panthers, at the end of the day, they're in a real interesting situation. I mean, you got Baker, you got Darnold, you got some talent in this quarterback class. You don't know where you're going to be drafting.
And you drafted a kid already last year too.
So, I mean, like, I kind of feel at some point this season, they do need to see what Darnold brings to the table. They do need to at least give him 1 to 2 starts to kind of see what's up.
I don't think that's wrong. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Let's talk about Bears and Falcons next. Eric, so we have the line that we're looking at, Betfred Sports. Falcons -3, over under 49 in here. Bears plus the 3. Talk to us about Bears Falcons.
It just seems trappy, dude. It just seems trappy to take the Bears right here. I know. You know,
so Falcons, the Bears have won. The Bears have scored 29 points in 3 straight games and lost all 3 of those. That's the first time in NFL history a team has scored 29 and 3 in a row and lost all 3 of them.
Their
Falcons defense is miserable.
Yeah, their defense is awful. Falcons like to run the ball. Bears are going to struggle. I was looking at PFF. PFF grades the Falcons offensive line the Falcons offensive line over the Bears defensive line as the best matchup this week in terms of a run game. I really feel that the Bears are going to struggle to stop the Falcons rushing attack. The Lions did something interesting last week. They had 2 guys spying on Justin Fields. Dean Pease, veteran guy, been around the block. I think he's going to have a game plan to kind of stop Fields, keep Fields contained.
And the thing is, the last 3 games, like I said, he's run the last 3 games for insane amounts. They've lost.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those where it's like, it kind of feels like in the NBA, like, hey, we'll let him get his 30, but as long as he doesn't have 25 and 12 assists and a bunch of rebounds and totally dominates the game, then we're good, right? It's kind of like that with him.
Yeah, I rewatched the game. He's awful quick in my eyes to take it down and just run.
Oh, yeah. And the last few weeks, it's been working really so well for him. That's why he's doing it, and you can see.
They're limiting his feet. They're not having him read the whole field. It's 2 reads, and it's not their run. And I'll be honest, from what I saw, it was 1 read that I'm running. He's not going through his progressions, and he's putting up good numbers, but in terms of processing the field as a quarterback, he's still behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, it's a nice step forward. Yeah, let's say this. They're way, way better and in better shape than they were 5 weeks ago. But what ends up happening, everybody jumps on the bandwagon very quickly, right? Like you're talking about the Packers. And so everybody sees this in this team, and they're going to, the Bears are playing so well, which they are. But again, keep in mind, they've lost all 3 of these games in a row with these big, dominant offensive performances. And to be fair, 2 of them were games they should have won. Like last week, they were favored in that game. They're up by 14. They have no excuses. Missed extra point, 9 penalties for 86 yards. They got a 14-point lead in the 4th quarter. And you're an awesome running team that has run for 225 plus yards in 5 straight games, and you couldn't put the team away.
It's unacceptable.
No, I mean, that's the game you're supposed to win there. And, Fields, we can mention his incredible numbers, 147 yards rushing. He also had 167 yards passing, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. So since week 6, he has 555 rushing yards. That's the most for any quarterback in any 5-game span in the Super Bowl era. That 67-yard run was just awesome.
As I'm not a Bears fan, but Bears fans should be pretty excited right now. You have some high draft capital. And honestly, the best thing that the Bears can do is keep losing these games. So they're going to have a higher draft pick and their pick of offensive tackle or defensive lineman. And then you have $110 million in cap room. They're in such a phenomenal place. It's insane. And you just want to have him keep playing, keep developing, but he does need to learn how to process the field better. Go through all the questions before he puts his.
He's not there yet. He's not there yet. Nice step forward, but this feels like one of those games where what we've seen from the Falcons lately, everybody's going to be off them because remember they started the season so good against the spread. Things looked really great for them, and now the last couple weeks. They have not looked good. That was a bad game for them last week against Carolina. That was a game that they should have played a lot better. And the problem is Mariota, since week 6 on passes of 20 plus yards, he is 1 of 11 with 2 interceptions. And the one was a 75-yard touchdown on a bomb to Bird right before halftime when they were already down big against the Bengals. It was like a garbage time Hail Mary right before the half. That was the only 20-plus yard completion they've had since week 6. Again, you can be a fantastic running team, but when you're this, compare the Bears and the Falcons, right? Mariota isn't as good of a runner as Fields, and he's not throwing the ball at all either. So now it's become really easy to defend this Falcons team but this is a spot for them. This really is. London had a little bit better game than it looks on paper. He had 7 targets, 5 catches, but just 38 yards and a touchdown. He did catch all 3 of his contested catch opportunities. Pitts was targeted 8 times, 2 catches, 28 yards. They got to get these guys involved a little bit more. I know that they want to be a running team and just hand the ball off, but you got to get creative. Like, you can't call a couple screens for London or Pitts. You know what I mean? Just like just a couple screens. Wide receiver screen, like get him in a little bit of space and let him go one-on-one with someone out in the open. If they're packing the box against you, I think it's a good Falcon spot, right? I don't know if I want to play it, but I'm leaning Falcons.
Anything less than 3, I'm going to look to get in. It's a very
I'm going to wait.
DFS spot. In terms of like Montgomery's a little underpriced this week. I think he's in
Herbert,
line to
right?
game.
You got put on IR.
Yep, Herbert's on IR. I think Claypool still has legs. I think he's a little undervalued. You have to remember that the Falcons are without both starting DBs, so I think Claypool could be worth a dart throw.
And just keep in mind, the last few weeks, Fields has run so much, it's taken a little bit away from everybody else. He's not going to rush for 150 yards every game.
No.
It's just not going to happen.
I think this is a huge David Montgomery piece.
Me too. I completely agree. I love Montgomery this week. He's one of my he's going to be one of my leans in all sorts of DFS stuff. Totally agree with you. So we're both leaning Falcons. We might make that one of our plays. I'm going to personally do what you did. I think this number, I know it's -3, -120, so it doesn't look like it. But I guess if you like the Falcons, maybe you take it now because it might be moving the other direction, right? I feel personally like it's going to get more Bears action, but the number doesn't look like that right now.
The number, I think it's going to get, I was looking at it earlier. There's a ton of bets on the Bears, but not as much money. So I think it's going to move. I think it's only a matter of time before it moves. It wouldn't surprise me.
It gets down to 2.5? Okay. So we'll wait and see if we can get a better number on that one.
It doesn't. And you can, if the Bears score early, you can live bet it. I mean, that's the great thing about the way the market is now. Oh, let's see. I saw a couple, I'm looking on my app, a couple 3.5s are starting to pop. So maybe you do want to lock in the 3.
Yeah. So yeah, keep an eye on that in the next day or so. Like if you really like Atlanta right now, maybe a 3 isn't bad to take. If you're on the Bears, you wait a little bit because then you could probably pop that 3.5. Let's get to Browns and the Bills. So that Bills Vikings game last week, wasn't that just another typical Vikings win, the way that they've been doing it all year long? So,
okay, so I need a vent. Okay.
Please.
Like everybody says, oh, that was such a great game. That game was awful. That game was so sloppy.
I agree.
6 turnovers. Dalvin Cook had a surefire walk-in touchdown. He drops. I have no idea what Allen was doing on that interception. On top of that, you have Allen who just needed to fall forward. He literally just needed to fall forward, and he didn't do it. Was that game entertaining? Wildly entertaining.
Sure.
Was the game well played?
No.
It was
an
awfully played game.
Minnesota is 17th DVOA. This is not like a very good football team, and they keep winning games. So, last week, and we're talking about the Bills because the Bills are playing the Browns. This is our next game that we're discussing. Bills are an 8-point favorite in this game, over under 41.5. So the Bills come up with a big stop late in the game. They get the ball on the 1-yard line, like you said. Allen fumbles. The Vikings get the fumble, score a touchdown. The Bills had a higher DVOA for the game despite losing the game. They outgained the Vikings on a per-play basis. They had a much higher success rate on offensive plays. 55% of their plays were graded successful. 41 were graded successful for Minnesota. The Vikings also recovered all 4 fumbles in the game. And then really what happened was late in the fourth quarter, Jefferson just was the best player on the field for about a drive or so, and nobody could stop him.
Yep.
So many of those things had to happen for Minnesota. And I'm not like the Bills have their problems too, right?
The Bills got some issues going on. They're not right.
They're not perfect, right? I'm not trying to say they're perfect.
The secondary is injured, and it's definitely showing with what what's going on because they literally couldn't stop anything. And I
This is
know
the
like with how the game is, it's hard to stop, quote unquote, stop people. But the reality of the situation is if you just kind of look at their offense, you know how many touchdowns they've gotten in the second half in the last 4 games. They've scored last 3 games, excuse me. They have not scored a touchdown in the second half.
in the second half. Last 3 games.
And
in all 3 of those games, Josh Allen has multiple interceptions for the first time in his career. It's
which brings me to my first future. Josh Allen, most interceptions plus 550.
Yeah, I mean, he's just flinging the ball around still. And the issue is they can't run without him. We've talked about it. Like as a team, here's their fourth quarter rushing this year. Rushing in the fourth quarter as a team this year, 66 carries, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, just 3.1 yards per rush. If you take away Allen, 45 rushes for 154 yards in the fourth quarter. Last week as a team, they ran 27 times for 175 total yards, 6.5 yards per carry, but 84 of those came from Allen on his 6 carries, averaging 14 yards per carry. They don't have a running game without him. It just isn't there. Like they've tried to use different personnel. So
see, I don't think they've tried. Like me personally, I don't think they give Cook enough run. Cook in that game was getting over 4 yards a pop. Anytime he touched the ball, he only touched it 5 times. I really think he's their best option. Singletary, he's a little too small for me, but he's better in pass pro. That's why they use Singletary more than Cook. And
what's happened recently is a bad stretch of decision making for Josh Allen too, right? How much of the time is he the one making the decision, right? Like, is he on? I'm not saying they're running the option, but is it a hey Josh, you can hand off type thing, right? Because I'm sure they have a lot of trust in him right now, but they're not perfect. You know, they lead on a game-tying field goal, and those 2 interceptions, they really hurt. That final drive, though, they go 69 yards, 5 plays, 35 seconds, they kick a field goal. But in the last 2 games, 4 interceptions in the red zone for Allen. In the red zone. 4. All they had to do, they were up 24-10. They have a chance to go up by 17. He throws an interception in the end zone on 4th down, and that kind of flips the game a little bit. Minnesota kicks a field goal to start overtime. The Bills get the ball with a chance to win the game. They drive it all the way down to the Minnesota 20. It's 2nd and 10. It's not 4th down. 2nd and 10, and he throws a bad interception to end the game. Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about them making the playoffs or anything. This is like they've had these lulls the last few years, but they're not perfect. And like you said, they're banged up. They haven't scored a second half touchdown in 3 straight games. You hit that point already. So,
we remember flashback to last year. They had that train wreck of a game in the windstorm at oh my God, against
was
New
it
England.
Jacksonville? No, it was Cleveland.
They played New England.
Yes.
And after the New England game where they didn't do anything,
that was when things flipped a little bit for them.
Started to run the ball more. And maybe that's what they'll start to do here. Maybe we'll start to see, a two-headed monster, Singletary and Cook getting over 20 carries a game. But how they're playing now, is Allen putting up insane fantasy numbers? Yeah. But are they winning games because of it? No. So something's definitely got to be addressed in the room.
The issue is with this particular game and like playing it as a spot, you have a Browns team that comes in, and man, you and I were on the Browns last week because it was a great spot for the Browns. They come in off a bye. They play a Miami team that I still think's a little overvalued. And this Browns team, though, they are 31st in defensive DVOA. They have one of the worst defenses in the league. And last week, they had the lowest individual team DVOA of any team in the week. So they had a worse game coming off a bye against a bad Miami defense than Jeff Saturday did in his first game as a head coach. Like, that's where the Browns were last week. I don't have a lot of faith in them right now. And this to me feels like a Stefanski thing, Eric. I don't know what to do with them. Like, I would like to play them in this spot, but I've lost a little bit of faith in the Browns right now for the next few weeks, at least in playing them. Can you get involved on them here?
No, because you don't know what's going on with the weather. I mean, like, if they get this big snowstorm, naturally it's going to face, it's going to help the Browns, because the Browns secondary, which we saw in the game against Miami, is really struggling right now. And if Garrett's not able to get home, which he wasn't able to get home against Miami, you're not going to disrupt that passing attack. If it's this huge snowstorm, like they're predicting, with like 15 feet of snow or whatever, then it favors the Browns, because the Bills aren't going to be able to take advantage of the passing attack, and they're just going to be able to turn around and hand it off to Chubb. So interesting spot. Do I want anything to do with the game? No. I'm going to sit back.
Yeah, I'm going to steer clear, because even I do remember like that big, like, Allen can throw through some of this stuff, and they get a little stubborn with it sometimes. But I agree with you. The way that these two teams are built, if it's bad weather, I mean, the Browns just feel like that's so much better an option for them. But I just don't understand anything they're doing. Like last week, they scored first, and they give up 24 unanswered points. Last week, when they're down in the game, they don't even use Hunt at all. Like, at all. It was bizarre. Like, that was it. I just don't really understand a lot of what Stefanski's doing. I'll wait and see the weather too. And if the weather's really bad and this bumps up to, like, I don't know, I could see this thing moving the Bills' direction. You know, do we get to like 9.5, 10 maybe even in bad weather? And then is that a jump in spot for me? Absolutely. You know, absolutely. Maybe it continues to move that way and we can get a number to play on the Browns. Let's go Lions and Giants. Hey, back to back for those Lions. And you know what? For your team that's lost so many games through the years that they should have or could have won, doesn't it nice to kind of feel like you might have been on the other side of a couple the last few weeks? Like, maybe this game was one that you maybe shouldn't have won, or, you know, Fields doesn't throw that interception and they don't miss the extra point. But if there's any team that deserves a few of those, it's you guys.
It's the Lions.
Yes.
It's the Lions. Before we jump into this game, real quick, one of the future bets I made, I bet the Giants not to make the playoffs at plus 300. Per tankathon.com, they have the hardest schedule remaining, playing games against teams with a 500 record or above. They have 2 against the Eagles, 2 against the Commanders, 1 against the Vikings, 1 against the Cowboys, and then 2 games remaining against losing teams with losing records. The Lions, who are doing better, and the Colts, which seem to remember they have Jonathan Taylor back there.
Yeah, that's not easy.
A couple websites do luck rankings. All the websites, I looked at 3 of them, have the Giants and the Vikings 1-2. You know, in one of those,
because all of their wins have been by 1 score. All 7 of their Giants wins have, and all of the Vikings wins have been by 1 score. So,
and the Cowboys own the tiebreaker. I think that's got legs. So I locked it in at 300 plus 3-1. You know, Giants do not make the playoffs. I kind of like that. So
we're talking Lions, Giants here, and your Lions are a 3-point dog on the road here. Giants a 3-point favorite. Over under in this game is 45. Hey, that was the first road win of Dan Campbell's head coaching career last week. The first one on the road. Pop the champagne.
They're playing better off the bye. One thing they're doing is Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, he's trying new things. He tried, like I said, spying 2 people with Justin Fields. He's moving Hutchinson around on the offensive line, and we're seeing that's helping because since the bye, he's able to get to the quarterback more. He's not just lining up on the same side. Swift finally got some run. Brown's in there. He's St. Brown. He's looking good. This Giants team, you know, their defense isn't that good. They are primed for an upset. They were trying to give
their Commanders are not Commanders. They're Titans light. They're very well coached, but they're the type of team that you want to keep betting against, especially when they're favored, especially when they're laying points. Like that's where you try to attack them because they don't have a margin for error. They're just not like a very good football team. They're a well-coached team and a pretty disciplined team. And like power to them. You know, they're 7-2. They haven't, think about this. They have not won 7 games since 2016. And they're 7-2 right now. They haven't even won 7 overall in 6 years. Like, hell of a start for them, you know? And Barkley, fantastic. Leads the NFL in rushing, 931 yards. He had 35 carries last week. That makes me feel good seeing that for the guy after his health, right? Is that too much? Maybe, but that gives you the signal that he's healthy after what he's dealt with the last couple years. And you know what? For Jones, he had a career-high passer rating. He's the 6th quarterback in Giants history to have had that high of a passer rating with 15-plus attempts. He only had to throw the ball 17 times. He was 13-17, 197 yards, 2 touchdowns, 88.7 adjusted completion percentage. His 6th game this year, 6th straight game without an interception. And among quarterbacks with 150 passes or more, he has 2. That's tied for first with Brady. He's 8th in QBR, 8 points higher than an average. All of his turnovers and the 4 overall turnovers that are the 2nd fewest among quarterbacks. So power to their coaching staff. They have made all of the players they have better. They've made Barkley better. They've made Jones better. They've made all these guys succeed. They're still a little bit overvalued. They're still not that great of a football team. And I completely agree with you. Over the last 4 weeks, they ranked 27th in pass defense efficiency, passing defensive DVOA. The interior defensive line is pretty good with Leonard and with Williams. That's where they're strong. Those two continue to be really, really dominant. Last week, they did a pretty good job against Pierce. 13 of his rushing attempts were 5 yards or below. Like, they win on the margins, but I don't know if I love, like, do you like the Lions particularly in this spot, or overall, do you just think the Giants, like, second half of the year are going to probably have a couple of these close games that they lose?
I think they're going to have a couple of these close games that you lose. This line was at 3.5. I missed the 3.5. I thought it was going to go up to 4. I thought there's going to still be love for the Giants in the market. If this gets up to 3.5, I'll definitely look to be on the Lions. Is it worrisome about Goff on the road? Yeah, it's a little worrisome about Goff on the road. You know, he did look better, but you do have to take it with a grain of salt because it was against the Bears last week. But this Giants defense, like you said, isn't really world beaters. The Texans were hanging around. They were moving the ball. I believe Goff will be able to move the ball. It looks like DJ Shark is going to be back for the Lions, which is an immediate boost to that offense, getting another weapon. Swift, you know, he did play last week. He's starting to play more and more. But at the end of the day, this 3 is just a dead number to me.
It feels accurate. Yeah, it feels where it should be. Like right here.
So it's just kind of, you know, it's kind of tough to do anything. So, you know, I'll just kind of sit back, maybe look to play, you know, St. Brown and some DFS stuff. But, you know, I want nothing to do with this game pre-flop.
And shout out to your Lions. You know, they're down 14. It looked like they threw an interception. That would have ended the game. But it was a penalty on the Bears. And then they are able to score a touchdown on the next play. Following that, on the next drive, Fields throws a pass that's a pick 6. And all of a sudden, the Lions are down 14 to tied. And then the Bears miss an extra point. It's like all those things that have always happened to the Lions finally help the Lions. And you know what? One of the things that helped them, 2 penalties for 15 yards. When you play like that, you deserve to win games like that. You have 75 yet less penalty yardage than the team you're playing against. You know what? You deserve to get the breaks in that game when you play a clean game. So shout out to them. St. Brown was big again, 10 catches, 119 yards, and that 91-yard drive to go win the game. How about this stat? The pick 6 they had, Akuda Matata. Did you hear Berman giving him the Akuda Matata, which I thought was pretty funny. I thought that was pretty good. But that was the first pick 6 for the Lions in 60 games. You guys have not had a pick 6 in 60 games. Oh my God.
Wow.
So some of those are just nuts. But man, you guys have 1 or 2 more games early in the year that you won. You'd still be right in the mix right now. Things would have to go really well, but damn, one or two more of those early wins, and you'd really feel like you'd have a shot to make one of those last playoff spots. Let's get to the Rams and the Saints. So the Rams will be starting Stafford. It looks like he practiced, and I think he's going to be good to go. Kupp will be out. They put Kupp on injured reserve. He is done for the year. Talk about two teams that are very disappointed with how their seasons have shaped up so far. The Rams, obviously, your Super Bowl champs. Last week, they had to start a backup quarterback, as did Arizona. But Arizona, backup quarterback with Colt McCoy, just looked way more prepared. He's a veteran. I mean, he started games before, but it's so tough to think positively about what the Rams can do on offense when Cooper Kupp accounted for 35% of their catches this year. That's the highest mark by any player on any team. He was second in the league with 75 receptions and 812 yards. He's a top 5 graded wide receiver by PFF. But, I mean, the drop-off between Kupp and the rest of their wide receivers is astronomical. Like, Allen Robinson is their number one option now. Maybe Higbee has a big game, sure. But the problem for them, Eric, all year really has been the offensive line, injuries, and some players that they were hoping that were going to be better than they are, a little bit of both. They just can't run the ball. They're 30th in rushing offense DVOA. So this year, there have been 227 times when a player has run for 50 yards. Think about that. Some games, teams have 2 or 3 guys run for 50 yards, right? You have multiple running backs and probably a quarterback run for 50 yards, like the Ravens or the Bears, some of them. The Rams, twice this year, 2 out of 227 times they've had a player run for 50 yards. That's not even 100. We're talking 50 yards.
Yeah. It's just a McVay team that low is just mind-boggling to me.
The way they built their team for the last few years, it finally caught up with them. Because they don't have the depth.
That's what they wanted. They got what they wanted.
They got the Super Bowl. You paid for it. You know what I mean? And you got to hope you win it. And they did. And so you know what? It's not a failure, but this is what happens right after a lot of the times because.
And you lose people that, Beckham to injury, Whitworth to retirement. Then you lose Kupp for 4 games because he went on IR. I mean, they're not making the playoffs.
No.
Regroup, move on to next year. In terms of the game, I look at it like this. This line tells me that they're not 100% sure Stafford's playing because it's 3.5.
I know, and it moved up a little bit, didn't it? I think.
Yeah. So it's really hard.
Which is so weird because we're recording on Wednesday night, and it's like they put Cooper Kupp on IR today, but they said that Stafford practiced in full today. I would have I'm a Rams fan. I know you don't want to do this. You have still a lot of the season left. If Stafford didn't play a game the rest of the year, I wouldn't mind.
I wouldn't mind either. Just
if they shut the both of them down. But I agree with you. Like, why even have if that's the case, like, why even practice the guy? Like, why even have him out there in practice and like have it said? I agree. The numbers moving like it's not a Stafford number. If Stafford's playing and this is more than a field goal, I don't care if Cooper Kupp's playing. I would still play the Rams just because I don't know. Do we know who's going to play for the Saints? Are they going to move to Winston yet? Have they made that announcement?
No, it's
Dalton. Because and that's the problem because Dalton has been miserable the last few games. Overall, they were 3 of 12 on third downs. They lost time of possession by more than 17 minutes to the Steelers. They ran for just 29 yards. They only passed for 174 yards. Olave and Kamara, their 2 weapons, they only combined for 9 targets. Like, how do you only get those guys 9 targets in the game? If you told me they had every target, I wouldn't have been surprised between the 2 of them. Like, every one was either Olave or back at Kamara. And it's hard, like, it's been hard to get a feel for this team all year because they've been decimated by injuries. They've been decimated by injuries all over, probably dealt with injuries as much as about anyone, offensive and defensive side of the ball. Last week, They had a 7% success rate running the ball. 7%. And the Steelers had a 47%. So you're not even, one of your 10 rushes isn't even successful. And Pittsburgh's successful every other run. They're getting 5 yards a clip. Every other run, 5 yards a clip. I don't really have a strong opinion in this game, but if we do find out it's Stafford and it's over 3, I mean, I would lean Rams.
Oh, you have to leave Rams. You have to leave Rams here. That's what I would do. Kind of a sneaky play. Someone who's having like a very quiet season, Juwan Johnson.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you mentioned him.
He's having a really good season.
Good, low, he's never going to be someone that you have to spend up a whole lot on DFS, right? Like that's a good low level dart throw on DFS.
8 points a game. He scored 82 on a year. He's tight end 11 on the season. He's always someone you can always kind of count on to produce. So that's a good DFS guy. I've used him a couple leagues, like when I've had a bye. So other than that, there's really nothing like in this game I really want to be a part of. Kind of a wasted season in my eyes for the Saints.
God, this next game is a weird one because I just do not think much of the Patriots at all.
Well, for me, this is it. This is how I looked at the game, and I bet the Patriots. Okay, 2 weeks ago, the Patriots played at the Jets, and what was the line? Patriots -3. Then the Jets beat the Bills. Both teams went on a bye, and now you're playing at New England, and the line's still 3.
Yeah,
what has changed during that time period?
And I completely agree with you. That's why I won't play this game at all. I'm not going to touch it.
That's my mindset. That's why I play the Patriots. Just that thought process.
And that's a completely accurate mindset. 100%. We're one of the tougher parts for me as a gambler where I have a hard time is when, like in this particular, right? I think the Patriots are super overvalued, but like overall as a team. But this number, based on the number that we've talked about a few weeks ago, they're not. And I truly think right now the Jets are a better football team than the Patriots. If like two teams with their players, with their personnel, with everything they have. But there is definitely a little brother, big brother thing with the Jets Patriots. Like there's this mental block, I think, with them until we see it happen. Now, maybe things are a little different for them. Maybe they come off of a big win against the Bills and they feel like, hey, we can beat good teams now. But there's something about Belichick and how dominant he's been against them now for a while. I'm going to stay away from this one because this is like a weird game for me, just for all the reasons I explained. I don't love the Patriots and I don't love the Jets or anything, but the Patriots to me, like Patriots, Vikings, and those are the teams that I just want to continue to play against. I do not think much of at all. And I think they're super overvalued.
I think the Jets are still a little bit overvalued.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree.
Allen got hurt. Wilson. And Wilson is not the guy in my eyes. I think Belichick's be able to confuse him. And you kind of look at the way New England plays offense. This isn't a team that's going to be dropping back, throwing the ball. And I really feel the strength of the Jets defense.
The defensive line.
No, I feel
or the back four,
the secondary. I think they're going to struggle stopping the run. Damian Harris is supposed to be coming back. That's another running back. So now you have Stevenson and Harris back there carrying the workload, looking to run the ball 40 times a game. And I said it toward the season, like the biggest weakness of the Jets defense was stopping the run. And I really feel like even though their roster has improved, that's still an area that's lacking. And I think that's what they're going to do. I think they're just going to ground and pound and run it, limit Mac Jones, take advantage of some silly Zach Wilson mistakes, and be able to get a win. So I bet the Patriots at -3.
Opponents on passes labeled left or right, so outside the numbers this year. 4 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 2 dropped interceptions, 14 passes defended. Opponents have completed just 57% of passes outside the numbers against the Jets, bottom 10 in the NFL entering the Week 10 bye. They've allowed just 6 yards per attempt on outside passes, 6th lowest in the NFL entering the bye. The 7 interceptions leads the league, 14 defended passes tied for 4th. Of those 145 attempts, that's the second highest total of outside passes behind only the Dolphins. So what they're saying is people are challenging the young guys and it's not going well. And I think your point is probably well stated in that I don't know if that's a Belichick thing that he's going to do. I don't know if he's going to go right at their strength for them. And with that, when that's a weakness of the Patriots, Belichick does the opposite of that. Like, I don't think he's going to be asking Mac Jones and Patriots receivers who probably aren't as talented as the Jets secondary to go against them. That's what's so weird to me about this game. Like everything that we talked about, I don't like the Patriots, but I don't really love the Jets. I like the Jets, I think, a little more than the Patriots just in how I value them as a team overall. But this spot has like so many things going, from what happened a few weeks ago to the Belichick stuff to even, like you said, the way these two teams particularly match up with each other scheme-wise, that I think it was a fascinating game for me to kind of handicap and for me to look at, but that doesn't mean you have to play it. Right? That's what's great about like what we do, that we can play anything, anytime, all these different ways we can get involved. You don't need to feel forced to play every single game every single time you have it. Couple other Patriots notes. They've recorded 51 hurries. That's the highest total in the NFL, even after Sunday's games, and they were on a bye. Opponent passing against them on third down, 45 of 85, 560 yards, 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 14 sacks, 33 first downs. So very good on third there. And opponents are now 5 of 17 against them. On fourth down, the Browns had 3 conversions against them in 5 tries in week 6. So you can get to them late. They got to be a little bit better on third and long. But again, for the Patriots, same thing like the Jets. Are the Jets a team that you think can attack the Patriots on third and long? I don't. I'm not worried about Wilson on a 3rd and 5 situation there. So really big game, important game for both of these two teams, because hell, like, you know, with what happened to the Bills last week, if the Jets win this game, they're in first place right there with the Dolphins. I mean, they're half game behind them. So it is crazy to think about. Okay, Eric, what's up next? We've got Eagles Colts. So we're seeing the Eagles a 7-point favorite on the road against the undefeated Jeff Saturday and the Indianapolis Colts. Total of this game, 44. Talk to us about Eagles Colts.
What was Frank Reich doing? Like, here's the thing. Like, you look at like Saturday. Saturday came in, and what did he do? He immediately said, Matt Ryan gives us the best chance of winning. He's starting. And everything he did was simple and basic.
Everything he did was simple and basic.
You and I have talked numerous times. You got to give Jonathan Taylor the ball. He's like, look, we're giving you the ball. 22 rushes? That was the first time that the Colts ran the ball 30 times since week 1. And this is what Colts brand football is, running the ball. It makes you think, what was Frank Reich doing there? What was going on there that it was so bad that this is what we're getting? Eagles have a little bit of an issue. They're a little bit more banged up than people realize.
And they're not that great against the run. I mean, they haven't been hurt. What's been deceiving about them, Eric, because they've been up on a lot of teams haven't been able to stay consistent to the run when they played the Eagles, because if you're down by 14 or 21, it's harder to run. But last week, Washington went in there with a game plan. They said, we're going to suck the life out of the clock. They ran 81 plays compared to 47 for the Eagles. They forced the Eagles to go 3 and out 5 times. And most teams aren't as disciplined as Washington was last week in what they tried to do. But that's a template, because we saw Green Bay do the same exact thing to Dallas, really, right? Can teams do that against them? If they can, the Eagles are beatable.
Yep. And no Jordan Davis. I think no Jordan Davis, the rookie from Georgia there, hurts the run game. It forces London Fletcher to play a lot more. he used to be really, really good. Now, unfortunately, Father Time is catching up with him. So the Eagles have a little bit of issue. You mentioned 28th against the run. But I do trust this Eagles staff to come up with something. The worry thing for me was how easily the Commanders wide receivers were able to beat Slay and Bradbury, two better corners in the league in running routes. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting spot.
I mean, like getting into last week's game a little bit too, like the Eagles should not have lost that game. Like that was a fluky bouncing game for the Eagles. Like they had 3 turnovers in that game. One of them
comes back to like our regression talk we have. So
absolutely. No, please don't. No, you're totally right. The turnovers are going to bounce back. You're not going to always get the luck of them, right?
Yeah.
And I think we can take a few things out of the game to be worried about. Like we said, their injuries and that you can run against them. Am I overall worried? Well, is it likely that 2 of their turnovers, one of them was a face mask that they missed, a total face mask on Goddard that forced him to fumble the ball. And when they reviewed it, you can't call a face mask on a review. It's not reviewable. So that wouldn't have been a turnover. And then the other one, Watkins was down and then he got up and tried to run. And that was just a dumb fumble. So both of those turnovers are not ones that you can necessarily count on or even say like, wow, that was a great play from Washington. That was more just like you're saying, regression, a little bit of bad luck for a team that was 8-0 to start and had a lot of things bounce their way, early on in the season.
They also had a big injury with Dallas Goedert going on the IR. That's a big blow to them. Jake Stroll, who is like $4,000 on FanDuel. With how the Eagles play, they're always going to kind of filter about 6 to 7 targets to tight end. That would be a good option. It's gonna be interesting to see like how the Colts victory. How can I say this? I trust the Eagles staff more than I trust the Raiders staff. That
Absolutely.
Raiders is a nightmare. Do the Eagles have issues? Yeah, but I think they're going to be able to kind of solve them this week. I think it was good they lost the game because it's kind of a little bit of a wake-up call for them.
You don't want to go undefeated. You need it. It's a good thing to go back to your squad this week and say, here are the teaching things that we need, right? These are the things that we need to work on.
Yeah, but again, like this is one of those games, like I want absolutely nothing to do with it. I kind of feel you have to use Jonathan Taylor in your 50-50 contests this week just based on what he did. But other than that, I just appeared kind of a little stay away from me.
Yeah, the Colts, Jeff Saturday wins his first game as a head coach, but they beat this bad, struggling Raiders team. You know what? The Colts were better blocking, better tackling, and overall they looked better. So you're right. Whether or not it was all about the Raiders being so bad, it was not like this team looked competent the weeks before, and they were just making bad decisions. Like, Ehlinger was not the quarterback for this team. Matt Ryan was fine. 17 of 21. He looked like he had a bounce in his step. He had a 39-yard run. Eric, did you see that run for Matt Ryan? That was the longest of his career. A 39-yard scramble.
But on the flip side, and I said it on your show last year, they should have fired Wright after not winning that game in Jacksonville last year. I thought this season was going to be insanely hard, like coming in. So I think this was a move that needed to be done. I think it was the right move. So
Taylor was back. He was healthy. 148 yards, 23 carries, 2 carries for 10 or more yards, 5 first downs, 68-yard touchdown. Offensive line helped the team to run for 270 yards. They allowed just 1 sack. And you know what? Paris Campbell, 32 targets over his last 3 games. And then on the flip side, with Matt Ryan as a quarterback, he's averaging 20.8 PPR points per game. Paris Campbell, like, he's becoming a guy in fantasy. Now, Eagles, like we said, we talked about, I'm not too worried. Like we said, a couple fluky things that flipped the script there. But Goddard being hurt, he was second on the team in receiving yards. He was tied for second in receiving touchdowns. And in Pro Football Focus grade and in receiving grade, he was 4th among receiving tight ends. This is a good player. And he's going to be missed on this team. This could be a really big Brown week. He's coming off a season low in targets, and the Colts ranked 29th against wide receiver ones this year in fantasy points. So no Goddard coming off a week where Brown wasn't involved very much. I could see them making a focus on trying to get him involved early because there are going to be a few extra targets around without Goddard. And I mean, Philly outgained the Commanders on a per play basis. They had a higher success rate on offense, and Washington recovered 4 of the 5 fumbles in this game, including all 3 Philadelphia fumbles. That's usually not going to happen. Keep an eye on Hurts. He has not run for more than 28 yards in 4 straight weeks. Just something to monitor for his kind of overall value. I don't mind that as a quarterback, because right now, does he need to take all those extra hits? No. But if you're using him in fantasy week in, week out, and he's not running for 50 yards like he was before, then all of a sudden his value is a little bit different.
Exactly. Okay. He doesn't have that. You have him for his rushing upside.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let's continue to Commanders-Texans. We've talked a little bit about this Commanders game when we were talking about the Eagles. Commanders, they ran the 81 plays to just 47. Eric, that was one of the best coached games I can remember. Because, as I said, they needed a few things to bounce their way, but that is the exact template of what you wanted your team to do to try to beat the Eagles. We have to come in here. We have to run. We have to go on long drives. We can't turn the ball over. We have to be smart. We just can't make mistakes. Hey, run, pick up 3 or 4, pick up 2 or 3 on a pass. If it's not there, throw it away. Don't force anything bad. That was a really, really well-coached game. And I was just impressed with the team overall. They like Heineke. They all do. You could see it. The players do. I think a lot of the guys get up playing for this guy a little bit. And this is probably a bad spot for Washington heading on the road to the Texans after getting that huge Monday night win against a rival, a divisional foe. Now you're right back in the playoff conversation. And then you got to go play at Houston, one of the worst teams in the league. It's going to be hard to get up for this game. Davis Mills hasn't looked good recently. God, this feels like a great Texan spot, right?
I mean, it's all about buying low, selling high, betting the NFL. You have the Commanders who just beat the team with the best record in the NFL in a standalone primetime game. People are saying this team is for real. They're making a playoff push. And then you have the Texans who have lost 4 games in a row against the spread. Teams in this position losing 4 games in a row against the spread are 55% ATS in this spot. So it's a good spot to be in for that. And then there's also the Sirianni factor. Ever since he's become a coach, teams that after they've played the Eagles the following week are only 35% ATS. That's just an interesting.
You've been hitting this for a while, man. That was and what I like about this, you got on this before it became a trend. That's how we have to do it in gambling. We have to try to get ahead of the trends, because then once it becomes a trend and everybody's found out, then the numbers start to move.
Yeah. So I just think this is a sell high point for the Commanders, a buy point for the Texans. I think this number is a little bit inflated. Nico Collins, he's starting to emerge as a good number 1 target for the Texans.
6 targets over his last 4 games. So that's that's a nice average, right? Like 6 targets per game for someone like that, who's a good DFS dart throw, I think, still too.
I think he's a good DFR. Dameon Pierce, he's looking great. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. I know Chase Young could be coming back, but he's coming back from a serious injury. It's going to take people a little bit of time to come back. Like, we just need to kind of pump the brakes on that. Take the Texans plus a 3.5, sprinkle a little bit on that money line too.
3 or over. I'm on the Texans for sure. They're on pace to allow 3,000 rushing yards this year. That would be the 3rd highest total in NFL history, the highest since 1980.
But with that being said, here's now interesting thing. Here's my thought process. So you just said that. So right away, who's going to be the mid-price running back that's going to be insanely overpriced
in Washington? Right? Is it Robinson that gets?
It's going to be
overpriced.
Everyone, overused. Everyone's going to
overused.
be overused. they're going to be going to look at Robinson. And I'll be honest, I'll kind of drift to Gibson then, just because
Gibson has looked better running the ball than Robinson.
Better, but that's because they've cut down on his carries. He's getting more productive with limited
carries.
work. So,
he's getting better looks. I agree. Yeah, that's a good point.
So I would look to play Gibson in DFS and Nico Collins. And then
we're both Texans over the 3. If you can get that 3.5, excellent. Let's go to Raiders and Broncos. Well, I wondered if the Raiders lost to Jeff Saturday, they would get fired. That McDaniels would get fired. He's not. They came out and said, then reports came out that said that the Raiders might be cash poor and that they may have to keep this guy for another year because they don't want to have to pay the buyout to get rid of him. Man, this is a bad situation for this Raiders team. And you know what? It's funny. They're playing a Broncos team. It's not like they're great. Like, both of these teams, that's what's so weird about this game to me, is that both of these teams feel like they're so like at the bottom of their value right now. Both of them. Like, I don't think either one of these teams could be thought of as less than they are right this second. The Raiders just lost a game to a coach that had never coached a college football game. He hadn't even been in the building for a week. On Monday night, they didn't even know who was calling the plays, and then they said it's going to be a 30-year-old kid calling the plays for the first time ever. That's who the Raiders just lost to. And so look at what's gone on for the Raiders just in like the last month, Eric. So this year, they've lost 3 games when they were leading by 17 points. Week 8, they got shut out by the Saints. They didn't even cross midfield until the 2-minute warning in that game. Week 9, they play the Jags. They're up by 17 and they lose to the Jags. So week 8, shut out by a bad Saints team that comes back and gets their ass kicked the next week. Week 9, you lose to the Jags, who come back and then get their ass kicked against Kansas City. And then last week, you lose to the Colts with a head coach that got hired on Monday.
Yeah.
They had 10 penalties for 74 yards, and those penalties took away 55 yards worth of plays for them. The defense has had 1 sack and 1 interception in the last 4 games. And those opponents, the Texans, the Saints, the Jags, and the Colts. Bad offenses. They can't even sack them or get interceptions against them. This is a miserable football team right now. But on the other side, I mean, you got a miserable offense in Denver. They shut down Derrick Henry for just 53 yards. They win the time of possession by 7 minutes, but the offense is miserable, and they have 8 penalties for 50 yards. Russell Wilson was 21 of 42. He had 21 incompletions. He got sacked 6 times. Denver only ran for 2.6 yards per carry. They have injuries in on the offensive line, the backup center and the guard. That made things difficult for them, and they were already bad on the offensive side. This was their 4th loss in a 1-score game this year. Wilson was pressured on 47.9% of his dropbacks. He went 7 of 17 for 88 yards, and he got sacked 6 times on those. He has been sacked 3 times in 7 straight games this year. Remember when that was the problem in Seattle? The bad offensive line and Russell Wilson? That's the longest streak of his career. He's never had a stretch where for 7 games in a row, he's been sacked at least 3 times. It's happened now. And
I mean, the offense is insanely struggling. I read this thing where if they averaged 18 points a game, they'd be 8-1.
And what's crazy? They've benefited from 7 pass interference penalties, which is tied for the highest in the NFL.
Yeah,
but they're penalties, and it's just, you hit on this one right away too. I got to give you credit. You were all over them, and this guy just not being ready to be a head football coach right now. And you were also on last year. You thought Wilson was done, and maybe he can have a better year next year, or at one point there's something left with a different scheme. Who knows? But this is starting to feel like him being stubborn and this coach not being competent, just a lot of bad things. Because you know what, Eric? They just they are wasting a fantastic defense. Like, this is a top 5 defense in the league. I honestly think if they had Chubb and were healthy, they're like a top 2 defense in the league. Their secondary is fantastic.
I mean, I kind of feel like their season was done as soon as Javonte Williams was out.
Completely agree.
Plus the one component of the offense that kind of BS your way to a victory. You hit on Russell Wilson being stubborn. We see what success Seattle's offense is looking now since Shane Walden, the offensive coordinator, can run the offense he wants to. Wasn't able to do that because who else? Russell Wilson didn't want that offense to be implemented.
Did you hear what the Pete Carroll took a shot at about the wristband too? Because Wilson doesn't like to wear the wristband, to look at the plays and stuff. And the problem is like they're always Denver this year. They're always sort of behind, like they're always late or just coming up on a delay of game. And it's just one of those things that they said that like Pete Carroll took a shot because Geno wears the wristband. So they call it a play. He looks and boom, the play's in. They're up on the line and they move. They're moving at like a way quicker pace because Russ was a little bit slower because he's the type of guy who's like, I don't need a wristband. I know everything. But it's, it's like a stubborn thing. Like he's trying to be showy about it sometimes. And it gets to the point where like, you know what?
He just rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah. He's a step slower.
Yeah,
you can do it when athletically you can make up for that, right? And athletically, he can't make up for it the way he used to with his arm or with his legs.
Yeah, and then he tweeted that out. Keep working on the bye week, and he's in Cabo or wherever with Sienna. In terms of this game, I look at it like this: you have Carr 57% ATS as a road dog, Wilson as a favorite 48% this year as a favorite with the Broncos. He's 0-3 ATS. The one thing that I know about this Raiders team is this offense can put up points. Even against this Broncos defense, I think they're going to be able to move the ball. I think they're going to be able to put up points with the weapons that they have. Josh Jacobs, Mac Hollins, who's developed into a great deep threat and someone that Derek Carr trusts. Foster Monroe, who, I think he's a starting to tight end in the league, but he's buried behind Waller and Devontae Adams. I just worry about this Broncos offense being able to score enough to keep up with them even with how bad this Raiders defense is. This Broncos, think of it like this. You had a whole week to prepare to go against the Tennessee Titans who are missing key people on the defensive end. And you weren't
They scored points on 2 out of their 13 drives.
Yes, and you weren't able to do anything. There's major issues there. I think Hackett is just a lame duck. I think this owner from Walmart, I think he's like, there's no point in firing him right now. He's like,
just wait till the end of the year and
just we're out the end of the year. And like, part of me, like, I had this discussion with someone the other day. My buddy thinks that's just the way to go because you don't want to hire an intern, have him do good, and then have to kind of force to give him the job. You would rather just fire the guy, go through the process, pick a guy, and don't be forced to take the intern.
And it's funny, like this team too, they're bad on special teams, right? They just seem like a team that would be bad on special teams. You know what I mean? Because they're not well coached. And for example, so compare them to the Titans, who they played last week.
Yep.
There were 17 total punts in that game. 17 Titans Broncos, and the Titans punter averaged 54 yards per punt. He had a punt that went 72 yards, and he pinned the Broncos at the 4, the 6, and the 8. It's like little things like that. He also had 3 kickoffs for touchbacks. So Denver's terrible on their offense, on their special teams. They play another team that on paper, they're just as talented in, but that team executes better on special teams. And now all of a sudden you're having to start from behind and in worse field position every time. They're a poorly coached football team. And I don't want to touch this game with a 10-foot pole. The only thing I'm looking at, so Jerry Jeudy left the game with an injury in the 4 games in, okay. Sutton has had 4 games in his career where he's had double-digit targets. 3 of them have come in games where Jeudy was not playing or left with an injury. So Sutton becomes the guy when Judy's not around. Maybe we look at Sutton because the Raiders' defense is miserable. If the Broncos can't move the ball or score a couple times against this team, they're not scoring against anyone. Did you lean Raiders in here? I'm staying away.
I took the Raiders plus the 3.
Yeah, like, I can see why. I mean,
on a low team.
This is just a game where I would take the dog.
Yep.
Like I would take.
I always take the dog. I have
same thing. What an ugly game. Broncos and the Raiders. Let's continue along. Bengals and the Steelers. Just a couple more games to discuss. So we got Cincy at Pittsburgh. Cincy is a 4-point favorite on the road. Over under in this game is 41. So your Bengals coming off the bye. You know what? Their offense, they've committed the lowest amount of holding penalties in the NFL. After a bad start to the year, their offensive line has improved a little bit, and they've shown improvement in how they play. They've been playing a little bit quicker. When they did play quicker, they're better. You pointed out when Burrow holds on to the ball too long, that's when they struggle. Now, Watt is back, so we saw how that picked up the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, and that helped them last week. This is a weird one for me. I mean, this feels like another game where like Pittsburgh could keep it close, probably a Tomlin game. I could see the Bengals winning by a field goal here. I don't really have the strongest opinion. Do you go back to Tomlin on this one again?
Yeah, I took it off the openers at 5. Tomlin 65% ATS. Dog 83% as a home dog. Taylor is only 40% ATS as a road favorite over a field goal. You mentioned TJ Watt. The main thing that TJ Watt is going to do when he comes back is he forces the Bengals offensive line to focus their attention on him. This allows Jack, Highsmith, Hayward to be able to get home to Burrow. And I know they won like the week before the bye, but that first game against the Browns with no Jamar Chase, and Chase isn't going to be back this week. That's a 4 to 6 week injury. There's no way he's going to be back for this game. Didn't look right. And I think it's going to struggle against this defense, the offense that is, just because of the stuff TJ Watt brings to the table, being able to get to the quarterback and make Burrow uncomfortable. So I like it there. We saw Najee Harris look a lot better after the bye. I like the Steelers here. I backed,
and I think, I definitely. I wouldn't lay the 4, and I agree with you. I'll probably end up playing Pitt at anything over if 3.5 or above. I'd be on the Pitt side, and I completely agree with what you were saying about Watt, about Chase, about how the Bengals didn't look that great in their first game without him, and then they pounded the run. That was that weird game where Mixon just ran all over the Panthers, right? It was a little bit it was the Panthers.
That was like the flat spot of the year for the Panthers.
Absolutely. Totally agree. The thing we're dancing tonight, huh? You and I are doing a dance a little bit tonight, huh? Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like, you kind of have to like remember that too when you look at that. Like, was that more of like the Bengals figuring it out? Or is that more of the Panthers letdown spot because of what happened?
Completely agree with you. My reason why I'm not jumping in to play this game has nothing to do with what you were pointing out about the defense. I actually think that the Bengals defense is a lot better than overall we kind of think this year. The Bengals defense is actually grading better than their offense by a lot of metrics. Like, this Bengals defense is, I think, 10th in defensive DVOA. They are 9th against the pass and 12th against the run. So they're pretty balanced. I'm a little bit worried about Pittsburgh trying to move the ball against them. Pittsburgh moved the ball pretty well last week against them off the bye. So maybe off the bye, they've got these 2 games that they have stuff ready for. They have some scheme. Najee Harris looked better than he had looked all year last week. And they got Warren involved a little bit too. So if Pittsburgh can do that and get a little bit creative on offense, we have talked about it before. I have just so little faith in Matt Canada as an offensive coordinator. I don't think he's very good. So that would be one of my only reasons to stay away from this game. But yeah, at the number, this just feels like another Tomlin close game. Bengals win on a field goal, or we're scratching our head at the end of the game going like, Pittsburgh had no point winning that game, and somehow they did. That just feels like one of those. Final two of the weekend, Eric, Sunday night and then Monday night. So, oh, no, excuse me. We got three more to go. Sunday and then Sunday night, Monday night. Cowboys, Vikings. One of the trappier games, it feels like, right? You're looking at this line and everyone going, the Vikings are not favored against the Cowboys at home? Dallas is a 1.5 point favorite on the road against Minnesota. But we talked about Minnesota a little bit at the beginning of this, of the pod. They came back from down 17 in the second half. It was the 5th game-winning drive of the season for Cousins. That's the most he's ever had. But they've had 7 straight wins by 1 score. And they are the first team ever to have an 8-1 record with a negative DVOA. They are 10% points worse than any other team that has been 8-1 in the history of DVOA. And it's not just DVOA. If someone hears us and they're like, DVOA, what the hell are those things? Stupid rankings that you use, advanced analytics. So ESPN, FPI has them ranked 10th. Pro Football Reference, SRS, has them tied for 6th. EPA per play has them 12th on offense and 13th on defense. They have been outgained by their opponents on a per play basis. 5.92 yards to 5.52 yards. They have a 45% success rate on offense, and they've allowed a 47% success rate on defense. I mean, those are just basics. Like, if you stripped away wins and losses from every team and just looked at what the teams do well, nobody would say that the Vikings are one of the best teams in the league. They have an 8 turnover margin, Eric. They've recovered 67% of their fumbles. Those are things that are not going to sustain. The only problem again with them, though, like, I don't know if this is the spot because this isn't a game where they're really overvalued. They're a home dog in here. That's what's sort of weird. Your guy Hawk has looked great for them. 7 catches, 45 yards, 19 targets in 2 games so far.
Bigger factor in the passing attack than I thought. I think this is how I look at this game. I played the Cowboys money line off of openers. I never lay points on the road, but if it's a pick 'em, I'll do it. I got them at minus 115 over it. The Vikings could be without not 1, not 2, but 3 starting offensive linemen. You have the Cowboys defensive line, which is getting to the quarterback, explosive. And if you have backups in there, that defensive line against the Cowboys is going to be able to eat. You have the Vikings coming off that big emotional win over the Bills. Let's face
it, overtime too.
You have the Cowboys blowing a double-digit lead in the 4th, losing in overtime. The Vikings defense, they give up the 3rd most receiving yards to opposing wide receivers. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be running up and down all over this field, just eating against that secondary. And it's
funny because these two teams coming off of their individual games, it was like those two teams were in very similar games where the Vikings opponent completely blew the game, spit it out, let them win. That was the Bills. And then Dallas did the same thing. They did it to the Packers. It was like almost a mirror image these 2 days. Dallas was up big. They let the Packers come back in. They turned the ball over a few times. If it wasn't for some of Dallas's mistakes, that game was done. Like I said, the Cowboys were 180-0 entering the 4th quarter with a 14-point lead, according to ESPN stats and info. And they have 2 interceptions, and both of those interceptions were touchdowns for the Packers.
Yeah.
Boom. That's 14 points for them. That's exactly how the game flipped. Now, they went out 3 and out 5 times. That hurt. They very easily could have kicked a field goal in overtime to go up 3. They tried to go for it. But one thing I guess a couple things that could hurt them. They had 9 penalties for 83 yards. And then there were 2 more penalties that were not called because they were offsetting penalties. They're bottom 5 in the league in penalties against. And the 3 teams ahead of them haven't played a bye yet. So they have way more penalties than everybody else in the league. They also have losses against the Packers, Tampa, and the Eagles. All teams in the NFC, teams that might hurt them in like tiebreaker situations. Right now, they look like they're in better shape than Tampa or, Green Bay. But if those teams get a little hot down the stretch and Dallas is sitting there next to them and they lost games to both of them that were winnable games, that could hurt. Yep. It was a weird game for Parsons, too. He had no pressures on just 8 pass rushes. It was the first time in his career, no pressures. And I think Dallas is I think Dallas is a way better football team than Minnesota. I do. And I think the line is just so goofy to look at and see that. I would not play Minnesota here. I'm not going to play this game. I agree with Eric. If you didn't get it maybe a little bit earlier, I don't know if I'd want to lay even just 1.5 or 2 with Dallas, but I would not be surprised if Dallas wins this game by multiple scores pretty easily in like a good bounce back for them after that. It's going to happen for Minnesota like what we saw happen for the Eagles last week. In one of these games where they're going to have 2 or 3 turnovers that are awful, that are just weird and fluky because they've gotten all the bounces all year long.
Yep. They're due for regression. We need to remember what happened last year. Cooper Rush went in there, led him to a victory. I think the same thing is going to happen. It wouldn't surprise me if this is a 7-point win by the Cowboys.
No, I mean neither. I think it's a good spot for them. Let's move along to Sunday Night Football, Chiefs and Chargers. So we have the Chiefs as a 5.5-point favorite on the road. Over-under in this game is 50. Looks like the Chargers could get back Mike Williams this week.
And
the Chargers and who?
Possibly Keenan Allen could be coming back.
So both could. Okay, I hadn't heard that possibly Allen. That would be a major help if they could get both of them back, because I mean that's what hurts. The touchdown rate for Herbert this year has been way down. But keep in mind, next 4 games, they face all teams that are in the bottom half of passing defensive DVOA, and they could be getting Williams and Keenan Allen back. So Herbert might be sneaky in DFS over the next month, and he's a little bit undervalued right now because he hasn't had his weapons there. But they've just got so many injuries too. Defensive line injuries have really hurt them. They have allowed a league low 13 sacks for just 62 yards, but they rank 30th with just 6.3 yards per attempt and 30th with just 9.6 yards per completion. Only the Cardinals and the Steelers average fewer yards per completion and per attempt than the Chargers. I don't know if that's going to work against the Chiefs, though, without weapons. This might be totally different for them with the weapons coming back. The Chiefs, on the flip side, I mean, this has been a fantastic Mahomes year. He leads the league in passing yards, touchdown passes. He's thrown 4+ passing touchdowns 22% of the time. 16 out of 72 times he's thrown 4 touchdowns passing. No other quarterback in NFL history has done it 15% of his games, and Mahomes has done it 22% of the time. Tony was the weapon that people like to see. 33 yards rushing, 57 yards receiving. He's going to be a nice use for them. It's kind of scary for Juju. That was his 4th concussion that he's had in the NFL. Yeah. I think they're going to be really cautious with him. I had 2 concussions in like 6 months and like 3 in a 2-year span. It can get really, really scary. CEH, man, I got to give you props again. You called this one from the moment they drafted him and said this was a bad pick. This guy's not going to be very valuable, and he's not going to make it with what they need, a between the tackles type guy. He did not get 1 carry last week. He's
done.
Yeah, not 1. Pacheco had 82 yards on 16 carries, and keep in mind, the Chiefs have the 5th easiest schedule over the rest of the year, so they might be up in some of these games where they're trying to run the ball out late. Pacheco could be a nice piece here. Talk to us about Chiefs Chargers.
Mahomes 44% ATS is a favorite of 7 or more points, is a favorite of 3 or more points, 46. So he's not covering these big numbers. And that goes back to the stuff that Gino and I talk about all the time. Just the value of these teams perceived by the market. Are the Chiefs good? Yeah, but their number is always inflated. You can make money by fading them. Herbert 64% ATS. If Allen and Williams come back, which I think they will, this is immediately going to make a uptick in the in what Herbert is going and the Chargers offense is going to be able to do. I saw this insane graphic where it showed the yards of separation that the Dolphins wide receivers were getting versus
the Chargers.
Yeah, just absolutely absurd what Herbert is able to do with the lack of talent in the receiving room. Chiefs really do struggle. They're one of the worst struggle defending the running back in the passing game. I expect this to be a big Austin Eckler game where he's going to be able to move the ball a lot in the screen game, lining up. I just believe the Chargers, even though with everything going on in the trenches, they have the advantages in the trenches. And Mahomes is showing us, is he probably going to win MVP and the plus 1,200 that I gave out here after week 1 going to hit? Yeah, but he doesn't cover big numbers. So
and you know what? This is like a real like narrative-y thing to say, but I say this as someone who's like a Laker fan and who has been a fan of teams that have been like perennially pretty good. I mean, not this year, but like perennially good. Everybody gets up for the Chiefs too, right? Like that's a game that you circle too. Like they're not only bigger numbers and bigger spreads because they're overvalued. Everybody circles a game against the Chiefs. This is a primetime game that you're going to get up for. Like the guys on the defense want to put a hit on Mahomes. There's something to be said for a little bit extra effort when you're a good team that you get everybody else's best punches, right? This is a game that everyone wants to punch. This is a rivalry game here too. The Chargers blew that game earlier in the year. There are a lot of reasons to like the Chargers, and I'm with you. I think if I could get anything over a field goal, I would take the Chargers here. So 5.5 is, I think.
Oh wow, I got 7. Like
that's moving because of the receivers, like we're talking about. So that's fine. At 3.5 or over, that would be my number. And like we said, we're already seeing it move right now. So if you like the Chargers, try to jump in right now because that number is going to keep going, I think, a little closer. Let's finish up, Eric, with Monday Night Football. We will be in Mexico for the 49ers and the Cardinals. So that's why, while it looks like the 49ers are a favorite on the road, I mean, they're both on the road. It's a neutral site game. It's not as if they're playing in Arizona. The only thing about this 49ers team is I will say, they are a very good football team. They get sort of talked about like they're 9-1 and like a pencil right into the Super Bowl team. And maybe when we get to the playoffs, they're going to be a tough team to beat. But I don't know. I mean, I still think that right now they're like a really buzzy bandwagon-y team for a team that's only 5-4. Now their defense is fantastic. They've allowed fewer than 20 points in 7 out of their 9 games this year. They rank first in fewest yards per game allowed, rushing yards per game per rush, and in first downs allowed per game. They held the Chargers to 52 yards of total second half offense. They pressured the quarterback 35% of the time this year on 35% of the time on Sunday last week on dropbacks. It was weird to see Mitchell come in, 18 carries, 89 yards, took, a lot of carries away from McCaffrey, who everybody just thought McCaffrey was going to be a monster there, but they show you that for fantasy purposes, it may not be fun. But my biggest problem with them, last week, they only scored 2 touchdowns against a Chargers defense that was really banged up. Like, they've got everybody there now, right? They've got McCaffrey, Kittle, Debo was there. Like, they got a lot of their offensive line back. There's still something weird with them. And maybe it's just going to take a few weeks to get it all figured out. But I don't know, Eric. I think this team is still a tad overvalued. Now, can we play Arizona and maybe Colt McCoy?
I mean, I think you can. I think it's relative. I think that I think it's really weird that this line even is out because you really have no idea what's going to go on in the quarterback room.
It kind of
Um,
feels like a Colt line, though, would you say?
it feels like a Colt line, but it wouldn't surprise me if Murray plays. I really like this. It's obviously priced that Murray isn't going to play. And this is just how I look at it. Like I'm counting this as a road game because it's out of Arizona. Kingsbury is an insane 80% against the spread as a road dog,
They're
69% as a dog
they're
in
11-3 on the road since
yeah,
2021. 11-3. That's the best record in football.
which is absolutely
It's nuts.
it's absolutely insane. Shanahan 38% ATS as a favorite, as a 7-point favorite or more, he's 33%. Jimmy G as a favorite, he is 43%. And the thing is, this is like this Cardinals defensive front is better against the run than people realize. I think that Watt and crew are going to be able to get home. I think they're going to be able to disrupt them and force Jimmy G to make some plays. And am I crazy to think that Jimmy G doesn't look healthy from the injury he had this offseason? His throws are more off target than they normally are. I think there's something going on there. And yeah, I think I kind of like the as crazy as it sounds.
You know what?
I
They
like
feel in watching their game, there's something to some of these teams that when they're starting quarterbacks out, they get simpler. And that's what they do when Murray's out there. They have to play sharper overall as a team. And Colt McCoy had a really nice game last week. He was 26 of 37, 238 yards, 1 touchdown, focused a lot on Hopkins and Moore. He went 8 for 11 on passes that were 10 plus yards down the field, 2 big time throws, no turnover worthy plays. And then on 40 pass blocking snaps, they allowed only 6 pressures. So they should be able to keep him somewhat protected. I think it's a good spot for the Cardinals. I do too. At 7 or over, I would take Arizona here.
And I mean, this is going to sound absolutely crazy, but Shanahan's no, excuse me. I said that reversely. Kingsbury's 4-1-1 against Shanahan coaching ATS. Also, there's also the factor I mentioned before, coaching against a coach that has won a Super Bowl. He's 60% ATS against coaches that have not won a Super Bowl. So he's beating coaches that I don't want to say aren't good, but not that top tier coaches. So I think they're live here. And if Murray, and this is going to be like the Bills game, if Murray practices on Thursday, this lane's going to drop. If Murray plays, this lane's going to be close to 4. I locked it in at 7.5. Anything over a touchdown, I'd lock in right away.
I know, and I don't mind McCoy at all as a backup quarterback. They were good with him last year. Didn't they beat the 49ers last year with him?
They actually did.
I think yes, they did. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So just it's so weird. It's so weird to see someone like Kingsbury be good in the situation with a backup quarterback and then just be awful in some other similar situations, like where he seems like they're by far like in the right spot, in the good spot. Yeah, it was last year. It was against San Francisco. Because last year they beat San Francisco twice. They beat San Francisco in week 9 at San Francisco with Colt McCoy starting 31-17. McCoy went 22 for 26, 249 yards, 9.6 yards per average. He had a touchdown, no interceptions, and he was really good. They ran the ball well with James Conner. Christian Kirk had a good game too. So one thing worth mentioning, Zach Ertz done for the year, right? I think he got carted out.
They drafted this kid McBride from Colorado State, who was the highest graded tight end. So I don't think there's going to be that much decline in the room as people think.
It's a good point. Eric, we finish up with NFL Week 11. Wow. So you can catch Eric and me on Sunday morning, again, diving into all of the NFL games. That'll be Sunday morning at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. We'll also talk some college football on Friday at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. So you can find both of those shows at BTV Bets, or if you follow me on Twitter or Eric, we always post them and we'll share them out there. Eric, what do you have coming up with your show this weekend?
I have a podcast coming out this Friday. Jim, who's on the college football show with us, him and I'll be talking the Grey Cup. That's the Super Bowl of the CFL, the Canadian Football League. My boy David and I, we do a segment where we each give our two best bets of the weekend, talk some NFL, and then I'm going to debut a fantasy football segment. My boy Nick and I are going to build a DFS lineup for you. So it should be a good episode. So if you guys aren't doing anything, tune in.
Eric, buddy, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again over the next few days. And folks, come and hang out with Eric and I every Thursday morning, 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, for just a quick little 10, 15-minute Twitter Spaces where we go over the Thursday night game. Good luck this weekend, buddy.
You too, my man.
Oh, you know what? Real quick, while we're here, let's go through. Let's just confirm on our 5 real quick, because
Okay.
I didn't write them down for this week, just so we have the 5 games. Let's go.
Titans.
So we got Titans. Yeah, Titans. Let's go. Titans, Texans. Let's go. Steelers. Let's go. Chargers. And Cardinals.
Sounds good.
Okay, Titans, Texans, Steelers, Chargers, and Cardinals. The 5 for me and Eric. We've come off of 2 nice weeks, 4-1 and then 3-2 last week. We'll see if we can get up. I think we've only had 10 weeks through. We've had 2 losing weeks.
I think we had 1 losing week.
We had one. I think we had 1 bad week, 1, 2, and 3, and then 1 that was 1 and 4.
Okay.
And then and so we had 1 week where it was like a bad week. The other one was a 2 and 3. Everything else we've been 3 and 2. We had 1 5-er, and I think we had 1 4-1 a couple weeks ago. So really solid so far throughout the year if you've been following along. Eric, buddy, good luck to you, my man. Thanks so much. And thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us here. Good luck this weekend.